3 Best Actor Oscars across 3 different decades, a handful of the most iconic performances ever seen on screen, and the honor of knighthood. Daniel Day-Lewis is one of a kind. When discussing the greatest actors of all time, 2 names often come up: Marlon Brando and Daniel Day-Lewis. Brando was a pioneer of method acting, a form of acting in which one understands and truly embodies the character. But Brando walked so Day-Lewis could run, because Daniel Day-Lewis truly transforms into his characters with an unmatched level of intensity both on and off screen. We're talking about only using 1 foot while on set, spending a few days in a jail cell, and even dedicating a year to learning how to make dresses for a role. There's a list of extraordinary things he has done to prepare or immerse himself in a character that I had to triple check to make sure I was reading it right. This is by far the most interesting video we've made about a person, a prestigious and private actor so selective that he has only starred in 6 films this century. So in this video, we're diving into all of the best moments of Daniel Day-Lewis's career, both on and off screen, that really prove he's one of the best. Daniel Day-Lewis was born in London in 1957 to an Irish father and a Jewish mother. After relocating at a young age, he was bullied at school for sounding different, so he embarked on his first performance, attempting to fit in by mastering the local accent. Once settled, he became a troublesome child, so his film debut at age 14 as a child vandal in Sunday Bloody Sunday was quite fitting. He discovered his passion for acting while attending a boarding school, alongside his interests in fishing and woodworking. He continued to pursue these passions, even doing well in a youth theater in London. However, in 1975, when it came time to choose a career, he initially opted for woodworking, applying for a 5-year cabinet-making apprenticeship, which he did not get due to a lack of experience. So he settled on becoming one of the greatest actors of all time and attended the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School for 3 years. He began the 1980s actively involved in the theatre scene, landing leading roles in Another Country and Romeo and Juliet. During this time, he also made appearances in some TV films and shows, and had his first major film appearance with a minor role in 1982's Gandhi. His first actual supporting role came in 1984's The Bounty, where he portrayed the sailing master John Fryer.
But I protest.
You protest, do you?
I am master of the bounty.
And I say I'm commander by law!
And while his performance was well received, he remained relatively unknown and overshadowed by the 2 leads, Anthony Hopkins and Mel Gibson. However, he didn't have to wait long for recognition, because the following year, his film career really took off. My Beautiful Laundrette and A Room with a View were his next 2 films. In the former, he played a lower-class gay ex-punk, while in the latter, he portrayed a snobby, pretentious, wealthy man from the early 20th century. Day-Lewis killed both roles, receiving praise from critics and stood out in both critically acclaimed films. But what's most interesting is that although My Beautiful Laundrette was released in 1985 and A Room with a View in 1986, both premiered in New York City on the same day. US audiences and critics were stunned by the versatility of this relatively unknown actor.
I couldn't leave him. Not now.
I somehow think that you feel more at home with me in a room. Never in the real country like this.
And while there are no anecdotes about his method acting for these 2 roles, given his consistency throughout his career, it's pretty safe to assume he remained in character off-set. He appeared in a few lesser-known films and made more TV appearances before taking on the lead role in 1987's The Unbearable Lightness of Being. Here he portrayed a Czech surgeon and even learned Czech for the role, despite the film being shot in English.
When I watched you dancing with another man, I thought to myself, he could be her lover.
This dedication to truly embodying the character paid off, because the film received critical acclaim, with Day-Lewis's portrayal praised for its raw intensity and emotional depth. By this time, Day-Lewis made quite the name for himself, being grouped with the most promising young British actors such as Gary Oldman, Tim Roth, and Colin Firth. However, he was about to set himself apart from them in 1989 with his next film, My Left Foot. In this film, he played Christy Brown, an Irish-born man with cerebral palsy who became a writer and artist despite only being able to control his left foot. Daniel Day-Lewis took method acting to the extreme for this role, to the point of frustrating crew members. He remained in character off-set, confined to a wheelchair and only performing tasks that Brown could do, except using his right foot instead, which they filmed through a mirror to correct. Crew members sometimes had to feed him and lift him over on-set obstacles such as wires. While this dedication was lauded by critics, crew members weren't always happy with him. He even suffered physical injuries from his method acting, damaging 2 ribs from being hunched over for weeks. Prior to filming, he forged friendships with disabled individuals in Dublin to better understand their experience and, by extension, Brown's daily life. His efforts paid off. The film was a critical and commercial success, with Day-Lewis's commitment to the role recognized with his first Best Actor Oscar win. That same year, he returned to the theater and starred as the titular character in Hamlet at the National Theatre in London. But during the scene where Hamlet sees his father's ghost, Day-Lewis broke down and left the stage. Some say it was due to exhaustion or a feeling of talking with his deceased father, but Day-Lewis himself said, "I had to leave the stage because I was an empty vessel. I had nothing in me, nothing to say, nothing to give." This theme of respecting the craft so much that he refrains from performing when he feels he has nothing to offer would recur throughout his career, hence the many breaks and retirements. But this performance of Hamlet was his last appearance ever on stage. The publicity surrounding this meltdown contributed to Day-Lewis becoming much more private. He moved to Ireland in the mid-90s to live a quiet life away from the media. However, not everyone can simply move to another country to gain some privacy. Fortunately, today's sponsor can help you with your privacy. On top of doing YouTube, I also work a full-time job in a position where people and companies want to sell you all sorts of stuff. My information was on a bunch of personal information brokerage sites like ZoomInfo, for example. This included my parents' home phone number from when I used to live there. I constantly got spam and sales calls from companies trying to sell me their products or services. My parents even got phone calls from these companies if they couldn't get a hold of me directly. It's a real nuisance because the spam callers and salespeople don't really stop after you say no or ignore them. They just keep calling over and over. And it's unsettling to think about how easily accessible our personal information is online. That's why I've started using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura helps me take control of my personal information by alerting me when it's being sold on the dark web or by data brokers. They even automatically remove my information from these data broker websites, giving me peace of mind. In light of recent breaches like the AT&T one where over 73 million customer records were released on the dark web, having a service like Aura is more important than ever. They provide all-around protection, from monitoring for identity theft to providing a VPN for secure browsing, all in one place. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/filmstack to start your 2-week free trial, also linked below in the description. Let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe so you can focus on what matters most. Okay, now back to the video. The 90s marked the busiest decade of Daniel Day-Lewis's career, with him taking on 5 lead roles. It really shows you how selective he is when you compare him to someone like John Travolta, who appeared in 18 films during that same decade. Each of those 5 roles pushed him to learn new skills to better understand the characters, and he always stayed in character even when the cameras weren't rolling. In 1992, he starred in Michael Mann's The Last of the Mohicans, where he portrayed a white man adopted by the Mohican tribe during the 18th century French and Indian War.
My death is a great honor to the Huron. Take me! You tell him?
For this role, he got fit, learned to make canoes, trained in hand-to-hand combat and shooting under the guidance of a US Army colonel, and even carried a heavy flintlock on him at all times while filming. But that's not all. He spent a month living in the wild in the region his character could have come from, honing his survival skills. Despite the challenges, the film was a huge hit, with his performance hailed as the heart and soul of the film, nothing short of iconic, combining rugged intensity with emotional depth. Up next, in 1993, he collaborated with Martin Scorsese in Age of Innocence, where he played a wealthy 19th century lawyer in New York City.
Does she love you too?
There is no other woman. I mean, the person that May was thinking of was never...
True to his method, Day-Lewis spent 2 months wandering around New York City dressed in clothes matching his character's wardrobe. He also didn't speak at all to Richard E. Grant throughout filming, who played his rival, only breaking his silence on the final day to thank him for putting up with his cold behavior. Critics loved the film, praising the entire cast and Scorsese, with Day-Lewis's performance in particular for its complex subtlety and restraint, drawing comparisons to Laurence Olivier. Despite not receiving an Oscar nomination like his co-star Winona Ryder, he did earn one that same year for his next role. In 1993's In the Name of the Father, Day-Lewis reunited with My Left Foot director Jim Sheridan, where he played Jerry Conlon, an Irish man wrongly implicated in an IRA bombing in London. It's based on a true story, and to understand the real Conlon, Day-Lewis put himself through a similar experience. He spent 3 days in a jail cell without water, and told crew members to dump cold water on him and verbally abuse him whenever they walk by. They also made him sleep deprived by banging on the cell walls. He also lost 50 pounds or 23 kilograms beforehand and adopted a Northern Irish accent throughout filming. The film received critical acclaim, with Day-Lewis's performance described as haunting and unforgettable, vividly depicting the emotional and psychological toll of wrongful imprisonment.
I swear to God, I know where I was at the time of the bomb.
In 1996, he reunited with Winona Ryder in The Crucible, portraying a Salem farmer amidst the 17th century Salem witch trials.
Then explain to me why you will not...
Because it is my name!
True to form, Day-Lewis fully immersed himself in the character, spending 2 months on the island filming location living as a farmer before they filmed. He lived without running water or electricity, used 17th century tools to farm, and even built his character's house. Off camera, he remained in character, reportedly refusing to bathe or shower throughout the shoot. Though praised for his raw and powerful portrayal, the film struggled at the box office, garnering mixed reviews from critics. And then he closed out the decade with another collaboration with director Jim Sheridan, starring in 1997's The Boxer, playing a former IRA member who spent 14 years in prison and has a new go at life by being a boxer.
You're not ready. You had enough, son?
I'll tell you when I've had enough.
For this role, he spent at least 18 months training with professional boxers in Ireland and was coached by Barry McGuigan. He apparently became so good at boxing that McGuigan said Day-Lewis could have held his own against some of the top boxers at the time. The Boxer received pretty good reviews, earning Day-Lewis a Golden Globe nomination. The film was actually more of a drama than a traditional sports film, but like each of his films before, the training was about getting into character. They didn't film him surviving months in the wilderness or spending 3 days in jail. For him, it's always been about understanding the character. But I think in some of the lesser extreme cases like learning to box or making canoes, it's evident that he's very passionate about exploring and learning new skills. And his dedication to his roles kind of gave him a long list of unique hobbies and talents. After The Boxer, he announced his semi-retirement from acting, and it makes more sense now. He returned to woodworking and even apprenticed as a shoemaker in Florence under Stefano Bemer, embracing a quiet life away from the press. That is, until Scorsese persuaded him to come out of retirement for his next film. It's kind of crazy how we still have 4 of his most iconic roles to cover, yet he's only been in 6 films after The Boxer. In 2002's Gangs of New York, Daniel Day-Lewis stars alongside Leonardo DiCaprio as William Cutting, also known as Bill the Butcher, a leader of a 19th century New York gang.
And may the Christian Lord guide my hand against your Roman popery.
The real Bill the Butcher was a skilled knife user, so it only made sense that Day-Lewis was an apprentice at a butcher shop and even hired circus performers to teach him how to throw daggers. To simulate Bill's fake eye, he covered his eyeball with prosthetic glass and learned to tap on it with a knife without blinking. And you could say he took method acting a little too far at times. He caught pneumonia during filming and refused to wear warmer clothing or seek treatment because that didn't match the time period they were filming in. Luckily, he was eventually convinced to get treatment, and like with all of his films, he stayed in character 24/7. If you've watched the film, you know Bill the Butcher is a little too intense to be around for too long. Apparently, he went out to eat with Scorsese and DiCaprio after filming one day, remaining in character to the point where the waitress was afraid to go near him. But the end result was nothing short of mesmerizing, one of his most iconic performances. The film received pretty good reviews with 10 Oscar nominations, including 1 for Day-Lewis. But the standout of the film was by far Day-Lewis and his terrifying performance, described as bringing both ferocious energy and magnetic charisma. I've never seen a character steal every scene they're in quite like this one. But what was most impressive was just how much he disappeared into the role. It's pretty shocking watching a Day-Lewis interview about the film where he's so soft-spoken and articulate.
Just so that Martin knows that he's got a core group of people around him that he can count on.
While he played one of the most terrifyingly charismatic movie villains ever. He then starred in 2005's The Ballad of Jack and Rose, written and directed by his wife Rebecca Miller. Day-Lewis played a farmer living on an isolated island with his daughter. His character craves contact with other people and believes he and his daughter need a woman around. So to get into character and really understand this feeling of isolation, Day-Lewis lived separately from his wife and spent as much time away from her as he could. The film didn't do too well, garnering mixed reviews, but no one had a problem with Day-Lewis's performance. But in 2007, he cranked his method acting up to 11 again, with undoubtedly the most iconic performance of his career as Daniel Plainview in There Will Be Blood. He portrayed the greedy oil prospector in such an unhinged and frightening way that you see zero remnants of Day-Lewis in the character.
Say it louder.
I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my child!
Director Paul Thomas Anderson wrote the script with Daniel Day-Lewis in mind after learning he was a fan of Punch Drunk Love, an earlier film of Anderson's. When Day-Lewis saw the script, it was like a match made in heaven, and he easily accepted the role, which is quite an accomplishment considering how selective he has been at this point in his career. To prepare, he listened to many recordings from the late 19th to early 20th century to perfect his voice. He spent a lot of time researching laborers and oil tycoons of that period, delving into letters and photographs to understand their behavior. He meticulously crafted a menacing and precise character that he portrayed on and off set, a role that he apparently spent 3 years preparing for. One of the advantages of fully embodying a character is the ability to improvise dialogue that the writer never thought of, while working seamlessly within the narrative. Day-Lewis improvised some of the speeches in the film and Anderson loved them. He remained in character so consistently throughout the film that the one time he broke character, the clip became viral. And honestly, hats off to the kid who had to work with Daniel Plainview for all those months. The child's mother was initially terrified at the thought of her son working with Day-Lewis after watching Gangs of New York to check him out, and rightly so, but she calmed down a bit after seeing one of his more civilized roles in The Age of Innocence. There Will Be Blood ended up being a hit, with everyone in all departments delivering their best work. It garnered 8 Oscar nominations, including 2 wins, one of which was another Best Actor Oscar for Daniel Day-Lewis, making him the 8th actor to achieve this. Described as the performance of a lifetime, nothing short of masterful, and a performance that will be studied and revered for generations to come, Daniel Day-Lewis as Daniel Plainview was an all-timer.
I drink your milkshake.
There are many great YouTube videos that analyze this performance so well. Make sure to check the film out because it's one of our favorites here at FilmStack. And finally, Daniel Day-Lewis rounded off the decade with a rare miss in 2009 with 9, where he portrayed an Italian filmmaker in a musical drama.
Especially when my body's nearing 50 as my mind is nearing 10.
Despite initially planning to take a break after There Will Be Blood, he thought that starring in this film would be a great experience. He underwent accent lessons to master the Italian accent, devoted 5 hours a day to singing and dancing lessons, and remained in character both on and off set. The film received pretty negative reviews, with critics criticizing its clunkiness and lack of catchy tunes. Although much praise was directed towards Marion Cotillard, Day-Lewis still received some, even getting a Golden Globe nomination. Some critics were disappointed that the film tarnished Day-Lewis's near-perfect film career, but at least we got to see his singing on film, and he was quite good. Daniel Day-Lewis made history with his next role in 2012's Lincoln. Directed by Steven Spielberg, Day-Lewis portrays the titular character, Abraham Lincoln, and it follows the final months of his life.
And on its way to ratification by the states, wrap the whole slavery thing up forever and aye as soon as I'm able now.
It was actually challenging to persuade Day-Lewis to accept the role because he doubted he could portray such an iconic historical figure. However, once Spielberg convinced him with a bit of help from DiCaprio, Day-Lewis dove in without hesitation. He approached the role with the utmost respect, spending a year preparing by reading over 100 books about Lincoln to really understand every part of him. Once he developed the character and became Lincoln, he didn't switch off at all over the 3 months of filming. This included having everyone, including Spielberg, address him as Mr. President, speaking in Lincoln's voice the entire time and adopting the same mannerisms. He delved so deeply into studying and portraying Lincoln that he famously said, "I never ever felt that depth of love for another human being that I have never met. I wish he had stayed with me forever." The film was a hit on all fronts, with his performance at the center of attention. He delivered such a powerful performance that received unanimous praise, with everyone agreeing that it didn't seem like Day-Lewis was acting, but that he was Lincoln. Because the film focused on such an important historical figure, it attracted many historians. And you'd think they'd nitpick a lot of it, but Day-Lewis portrayed Lincoln in a way so close to how they imagined he'd be, from the voice to the awkward mannerisms, even down to his walk. For his efforts, he won his 3rd Best Actor Oscar, the only actor to ever do so. But soon after winning, he announced he was taking a break from acting for a bit. When he won his 2nd Oscar for There Will Be Blood, he knelt in front of Helen Mirren, who jokingly knighted him, and he said,
That's the closest I'll ever come to getting a knighthood, so thank you.
Well, in 2014, he was actually knighted by Prince William for his services to drama. Now, onto his final film, 2017's Phantom Thread, reuniting with Paul Thomas Anderson. Here he played Reynolds Woodcock, a renowned British dressmaker in the 1950s.
What happened to make you behave like this? Is it because you think I don't need you?
So what did Day-Lewis do to prepare? He spent a year learning how to make dresses, working for the New York City Ballet's head of the costume department. And by the end of his training, he was able to recreate a Balenciaga dress. Learning these skills, along with his deep research into 1940s and 50s fashion shows and designers, gave him a much deeper understanding of his character. With all this research, he also collaborated with Anderson on the script, to the point where Anderson said Day-Lewis could have some kind of co-writing credit. As always, he remained in character throughout filming, and everyone on set referred to him as Reynolds. The film was a hit with critics, with praise going to everyone, especially Day-Lewis's performance. His portrayal was said to have captured the character's obsession and vulnerability with haunting authenticity. It's a character with many layers, and he showed each layer with such precision. A very different performance than Bill the Butcher and Daniel Plainview. It was much more delicate. For this role, he received yet another Oscar nomination, and it would be his last nomination ever because before the film was released, he announced he was officially retiring from acting. He said he loves acting, but that it's time to explore the world in a different way now. Adding, "I dread to use the overused word artist, but there's something of the responsibility of the artist that hung over me. I need to believe in the value of what I'm doing. And if an audience believes it, that should be good enough for me. But lately it isn't. But can you really blame him for retiring? His approach to acting must be very physically and mentally demanding. He becomes a new character for a few years, learning every single thing about the character. It probably affected his wife as well. I can't imagine having to live with Bill the Butcher for a few years. But I think it really comes down to passion. He was always passionate about so many things. It seemed like when he took on a role, he was less passionate with the actual process of acting than the preparation for the role. He never cared for the actor's life. He's very private and doesn't appear in many interviews. When he came back from retirement to star in Gangs of New York, he didn't have any regrets about not acting for so long, and that
I didn't feel the time passing. I was very happily doing other things.
it took a lot of convincing to come out of retirement last time, but it happened, so who knows if he'll come out of retirement again. For all we know, he could already be years deep into preparing for his next role. All we know is that every actor can breathe a sigh of relief because they won't have to compete with Day-Lewis for an Oscar again. So is Daniel Day-Lewis one of the best actors? I think the definitive answer is yes. He's a generational talent and has the performances and awards to back it up. Some people roll their eyes when they hear the words method acting. There's the famous Dustin Hoffman story where he didn't sleep for 72 hours to be as tired as his character in Marathon Man, to which Laurence Olivier just asked, "Why don't you try acting?" And then there are all those weird Jared Leto as Joker stories, like sending rats to people. But Daniel Day-Lewis was doing something much more. He was really becoming the character to the point where you couldn't even tell he was acting. His versatility and devotion to his roles should always have his name being dropped when discussing the greats. So there you have it, Sir Daniel Day-Lewis's incredible career. Do you think he's one of the greatest actors of all time? Share your thoughts below. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like and subscribe, and check out our Patreon for some cool perks. But until next time, have a good one.